Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to my channel. My name is Sue on Chat to Sue, a channel where we talk about things that we really need to talk about and learn while we're doing that with our children, our families, our parents, and the society as a whole. Today's topic is aging narcissists. Are they getting better or getting worse? Right? They don't change. Instead, actually, they're getting worse because remember, narcissists they based who they are on stuff, money, properties, anything that to do with wealth, right? They run after that, and that for them is a priority, right? They do not deal with any kind of trauma and understand empathy, right? Now, they not getting better. Instead, actually, they get worse. You know, in my case, my dad, that I realized a little bit later that okay, so when I was older, that what he's doing is called narcissism. When I was growing up, I didn't even know what narcissism was. But with his action, I kind of understand certain things. I knew that the hitting of us and name calling and all these horrible things he would say was emotional and physical abuse, right? And while when I was a little older, he left. He left when I started working. And because now I was earning my own money, so we were not depending on him. So he left, right? It's another story. Him leaving, it was just dramatic as well, right? But I lost my mom in 2020, right? And that for me was one of the most painful moment of my life because my mom was my best friend, and we talk about everything and we went through a lot. Anyway, a day before my mom was buried, a battalion was assembled against me of my dad's family. They came and they sat down. They said, oh, we want to talk to you about this and that and whatnot, and including the house. I'm like, what house? They're like, this one. Your dad is having a hard time where he's living now, where he's staying, and he wants to come home. It was like all the years of trauma and abuse just come rushing in. I said to them, with all the due respect that you think you deserve, this man left us. He left us in a house that looked like it was gonna fall off any time. We teamed up with my mom to fix this house. Right now, I was working and I'm busy fixing a house that he was supposed to do. I was supposed to go out there and find my own space, right? Because that was my dream. That later on in life, I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna find my house. I'm gonna buy my house and I'm gonna buy my car. I'm not gonna be staying here with my parents. I wanna launch my life, right? But instead, I delayed that because he decided after he got the money, his pension and all that, he's leaving, and he left us with nothing. And now here he sits here now. He wants to come back. I was like, no, he's not coming back here. Number one, he's got a restraining order because he's an abuser. He's not gonna come stay here. Number two, he left us. Nobody put a gun on his head and said leave. No, he made that decision. He made that choice, and he left. So no, he's not coming to stay here. And another thing, just to top it on, as soon as I buried my mom, you all are leaving. I don't want anybody in this house other than me and my children. Just like when it was. It's very, very interesting that when he left, when he was telling you guys he's leaving, no battalion was assembled here to ask him why he's leaving. Now you're gonna assemble this battalion against me to ask him to come back. He's not coming back here. And that was it. And after we buried my mom, everybody left because I told them I don't want anybody to stay here. So they don't change. They never change. Instead, they will um, repeat the cycle of manipulation and love bombing and all these shenanigans that you do. If you let them back in, then it's gonna be that drama. But anyway, we've got Dr. Ramani who would tell us more regarding the psychology of why narcissists, older one, gets even worse when they grow old. Let's hear what she says. Thank you, Dr. Ramani, for your videos. Very informative.
So one thing we're going to talk about today is, here's an interesting issue, because if you think a narcissist who's younger is a handful, let me tell you, you ain't seen nothing until you see an aging narcissist. Narcissism is a very much, in some ways, a disorder of vanity, right? It's a pattern that's very much about superficiality and look at me and grandiosity and tell me I'm great and seeking validation. We live in a very ageist society. We tend to treat older people badly. We assume that they're less attractive, that they lack sexual prowess. They literally become invisible. Can you imagine for a narcissist to start feeling invisible? And in that way, to be narcissistic and become older is nothing short of a nightmare. So if you thought they were mean when they were younger, hold on to your hat. Something that's become very interesting is in our changing sort of landscape of more and better cosmetic procedures, surgeries and injections and all of that, narcissists love that because at least it gives them this sense that they can try to look younger. They go to great pains to ensure that they stay in great shape as they get older. They will often dress in clothes that you sometimes might see on a much younger person, and so they're really trying to hold on to their youth at any cost, thinking that they can still get validation that way. Something that also happens, particularly for narcissistic men, is they often derive a lot of their ego from their power and their position in society. So unless they're one of the lucky ones who did make a lot of money and hold on to that into older age, and maybe they trade in for a younger partner or something else that makes them look good to the world, if they lose that power, position, prowess, or money, then you can really see a crash and burn because their identity often came from that power that they would hold in a workplace or something like that. It's not unusual for their irritability to really get magnified as they get older, and they can start to feel quite angry at the world that seems to be continually forgetting them. Our bodies start to give out when we're older. All that working out in the world doesn't mean that you're not going to have the aches and pains, and no matter how hard you try, you can only suck in that gut so much, even with all the cosmetic surgery in the world. As your health starts to turn south when you get older, that can also be experienced as really, really threatening, not only to a person's ego, a narcissistic person's ego as they get older, but they may not even have the coping skills to deal with the frustrations of getting older and all that entails. For example, sometimes you can't even get around the world as easily. I think a lot of times one of our biases or expectations we have for older people is that they're going to become real sweet. If you ever had a sweet grandparent, you think, well, everybody gets real sweet when they get older. So maybe when the narcissistic person in my life gets older, everything's just going to get a little easier. Not going to happen. One interesting thing to reflect on with personality is your personality as a younger person gets more intensified as you get older. Sweet people become really sweet. Irritable people become really irritable. And narcissistic people become really narcissistic. They tend to reject sometimes offers of help, or if you do try to help them, they will be very cruel and invalidating and tell you you're doing it wrong, which might make you feel like, why bother? They may violate boundaries as a grandparent. So all the things they kind of did to you, they're sort of repeating the cycle. And if anything, they might even compete with you, trying to win over your grandchildren and almost compete with you like, hey, I'm going to be a better grandparent than you are a parent. So that can also be off-putting. But when you're dealing with a narcissist who's getting older, hold on to your hat. This is not going to be your sweet grandmother who kept baking you cookies. This is going to be the person who is every bit as irritable as they were when they're younger, but lacking the same kind of power and swagger they had as a younger person. And the loss of that status, if you will, is something that almost feels impossible for them to come back from. For a lot of people, they hope that as their narcissistic parent gets older, maybe they don't have as much stress or they don't have to work as hard, that maybe finally, once and for all, their parent will soften. Sometimes very much the opposite happens, causing even more grief for a person who's a child of a narcissistic parent. The best I can tell you is at any age, whether a younger, middle age, or older, when you're dealing with a person who's very narcissistic, manage your expectations. And if anything, if you're dealing with a narcissistic person who's getting a lot older, manage them even more. Thanks a lot. Stay tuned. We have more coming.
So that means there's sort of no one consistent pathway on how this narcissism younger looks in a person who's older, and certainly a person with dementia older. Now, the tricky piece is that those higher order interpersonal tactics that narcissistic people engage in, such as manipulation and gaslighting and future faking, all of these are not going to be as accessible to a person with significant memory impairments or other cognitive impairments. The difficult personality stuff that might show up in an older person with dementia, that might reflect some of the irritability, do it my way or the highway, don't tell me what to do kind of stuff. That kind of stuff can also result in setbacks in an older person's self-care. And many narcissistic folks have burned most of their bridges by the time they get to older age. So this pushback may mean even more social isolation and less people willing to care for them or help them out. So it may not be the usual intricate manipulation you might have seen in this narcissistic person, but just hurtful throwaway statements like, you never help me, you don't care, you're selfish. Even though the person doesn't feel like they're all together there, those statements still hurt. But what about people when the narcissistic parent does develop cognitive impairments as they become older, but they actually become less combative, perhaps even childlike, and they're no longer as cruelly manipulative or gaslighty or any of those other things. They may not say the mean things like you don't care, and instead you may see a shift into them being more docile or quiet. That is something people say they have a little bit more difficulty with in a different way. Now, folks in these situations will say they now feel kind of guilty for even thinking their parent was narcissistic or manipulative or mean when they were younger. The self-blaming can feel worse. And as you watch your parent become more dependent and sort of fading away, or even believe it, or that it's even kind of sweet, it can be a grief like no other. Because you might think, why couldn't it have always been like this? Were they always like this deep inside? How can I make the most of this time that remains? And all of that becomes a complicated stew of grief and guilt and even pity. Now, there's a subset of folks where that melting of ego that happens, that aging can bring, could result in more of a docile way of being. And that steps in where the narcissism really once was. It's not the norm. The oppositional, angry, defiant stuff tends to be more normal with aging narcissistic folks. And you may also have the grief that the once mighty parent, although they were cruel, is now sort of a gentle but a shell of that formidable self, leaving you wondering if both can exist in the same person, and seemingly no, they can't. Now, this issue of what aging and narcissism look like, let's face it, folks, it's about to hit a fever pitch because lots of things are happening in society at the same time. Baby boomers are getting older. Their children are also managing their own children. They're a real sandwich generation in a really tricky world. And we're all still trying to figure this out. Some of you may just be getting and figuring out your parents' narcissism. And then just as you figure that out, you might be facing a whole new set of shifts as they become older. And if you did go, for example, no contact with a parent or a family system, and now are being called forth to step in to help coordinate care, these shifts can be far more vexing. And all I can say is be very gentle with yourself as you navigate this. There's really no playbook for this. And as always, multiple things can be true. Your narcissistic parent may have raised you in a manner that subjugated you and left you full of self-doubt and self-blame. You may have found that because of that subjugation, because of that self-blame, because of that self-doubt, that you led that led you to make decisions in your life that could have made all of this worse. You may have detached from them, and now this very parent is transforming into someone you no longer know how to interact with, particularly if they have softened. You may be very tentative. Listen, we don't get to turn the clock back, and healing and moving forward means making choices that also account for you and what you've been through and aren't still an ongoing full subjugation to them. If your parent does become more combative and difficult as they become older, in some ways, strangely, the decisions may feel a little easier and you may just feel done with them. But if it goes the other way and they become softer and gentler, it becomes very complicated. Remember, all along, you were never responsible for their behavior. And how you proceed with any caregiving is deeply personal. Try and find ways to shut out the voices of the enablers, get your own therapy, and recognize that, as with all narcissistic relationships, there is no choice here that will ever feel completely right. We want it to be a formula, and the formula would be much easier, that the narcissistic parent gets more and more brittle and difficult as they get older, in some ways almost making it easier to let go of them and then work through your grief even after they pass. But that's not always the case. And many people will say a once formidable, booming, demanding, boundary-violating parent becomes someone very gentle and quiet that they no longer recognize. As I said, while that might seem easier than an oppositional, angry parent, a lot of the other negative feelings, like pity, guilt, and even shame, can be equally destabilizing. And so if you did have a narcissistic parent, be prepared that their aging, whether or not they develop dementia, is often going to represent a new and challenging process in the guilt and grief of this process. And always, always remember to be kind to yourself as these processes unfold, because goodness knows you are owed a lifetime of it. Thanks again.
Well, quite informative, and interesting, really, right? They will create drama and they will want you to fix it for them. Imagine years and years and years of the drama as children, and now this person is in their old age and they still the same, very entitled, grandiose, and they still treat everybody like crap. Yet they want you to take care of them. Isn't that fascinating? They never change, they get worse. And they get entitled to certain people like grandkids and whatever. When you because I'm sure by now their children have realized that, okay, this person is really a narcissistic bully and you want nothing to do with him. So they will leash to the grandkids to say, okay, your parents are this and this and that. You come in and visit us or whatever, come stay with us. And then they will do the same cycle to the kids, right? And then the generational trauma continues. It is so bad. So unless people stand up for themselves and say, Mina, not on my name, not in my name, I'm not gonna let these people bully me and you know and be berated like I was a child, a 3-year-old. But anyway, yeah, I hope you've learned something. I hope you understand that you cannot uh, still be treated like you a child. Stand up for yourself, especially when it's wrong, so that this trauma doesn't continue, right? And I know it's some people, these are your parents, and you gotta treat them with respect, but put those boundaries. Doesn't necessarily mean that when you treat them with respect, then they have to bully you, right? You still need to stand up for yourself so that um, this ends. But I hope you've learned something, and thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Till we meet again, sending much love. Bye.